My name's Tony Butler. I'm also known as Tony Butler. From 1984 to 1987, I was a member of the hardcore punk underground scene in Pensacola, Florida. From 1985 to about at the end of 1986, I was a member of a group called Hyperactive Youth, which were a group of younger people here in Pensacola who were dedicated to the hardcore scene. We made flyers and handed them out at shows. We helped promote people's concerts. And we also printed our own zine called Zero Expectations. I'm standing today in front of the former Metropolitan Community Church here on the corner of Larua and Alcanese in downtown Pensacola. On May 17, 1986, this is the spot where a group of young people took the hardcore scene back into their own hands and made history. At this spot, we as a group of young people set up a show that over 300 people attended. At that time, nobody our age in the city had done anything like that. Up until then, shows have been booked by people who had a lot more experience than us and who are a little bit older than us. We took a chance and booked this show and handed out flyers, and we figured about 50 people would come. However, we had over 300 show up. Around the end of 1985, all ages shows had ceased to exist in Pensacola. Up until then, they'd taken place at a club called The Mix on the other side of the city. So we were at odds to find a venue to have bands in. So what we started doing individually, we would go around to all these different places in the city looking to find a place where bands would play. We went to bingo clubs, we went to churches, we went to youth places, YMCA, things like that. We got turned down by everybody. I mean, literally the doors were slammed in our face. My great friend Thomas Manning called me up and said, "Hey, I found a venue." I'm like, "Where at?" And he was like, "It's at the corner of Larua and Alcanese. It's called the Metropolitan Community Church. They're only going to charge us like $100 to use the place." I don't even think it was that much, maybe $50. And he's like, we can use that." So we came down and checked it out, and it was perfect. This place was wide open. There was a stage already built in the far back end. The only thing that was bad about it was ventilation. There was no ventilation whatsoever.
I'd never been to a show. I come over to Pensacola for the weekend with somebody from school, and we go to a church in downtown close to the Handlebar. And apparently it was I guess a gay church, but it was a Catholic church too. And so when I come up to the place, I said, "What the fuck is this? It's in a church basement or something?" And there was two, like, I don't know if they're cardinals or priests, but they were they're full robes and everything standing outside. I said, "This is fucking weird, man." And I went down the stairs to the basement of this place, and this guy, Tommy Manning, who I'd grown up with, had gone to my elementary school with me, and I guess he'd gone to my high school, but I was never really good friends with him, but I remember him. I played football with him. He never had a lot to say, and I didn't know him real well. But he was taking money at the door. I said, "Tom," he said, "Albert." I said, "Dude, what's going on here?"
That night, it was really cool about that night because every band that played was not from Pensacola, pretty much. We had headlining was a band called Legion of Decency from Gulfport, Mississippi, who are an unbelievable hardcore band, best known for their singer Joe Pestilence, who's still active in music today. He used to play with the Spits, and he's done a lot of other stuff on his own. It was their first Pensacola appearance ever. And we had a band called Dispersion from Mobile, Alabama, which was also their first Pensacola appearance ever. And a significant note that night as well, at the last minute, we allowed a group of young people to play from Pensacola who were the Headless Marines.
So I go in, and right when I go inside, the Vomit spots are playing. And it's real fast, and it seemed like the songs would be real slow, and then all of a sudden, it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and they would just go 1, 2, 1, just super fast. Whenever they start playing fast, this big pitted kids would hauling ass around, man, and just people busting their ass on the floor and people picking them up, and I was like, man, what is this crazy shit all about? And I just came in there and sort of stood on the edge, and there was these two little, like, sort of skinhead looking punk rock chicks that were just going, and anybody who was standing on the edge of this thing, they would just push them into the middle of this big scrum of people. And I was like, man, this is fucking crazy. I've never seen anything like this. And I'm just standing there, and next thing I know, one of those chicks had come up behind me and threw me in the middle of it. I was fuck. I went around. I didn't know what to do. I just went in the middle of it, went around this pit for a while, and I was shit, next thing I was like going, man, this is fun. And I remember the band, they played like 2 more songs, and at the end of the set, the singer, whose name was Keith, I guess I hadn't met him at that point, he threw out these plastic fried eggs. It was like the shit he threw out to the crowd, and all these dudes were fighting for this thing. And then the next band sets up, and it's this guy, the band is called LOD, Legion of Decency, and the singer, he doesn't have a mohawk, he's got a reverse mohawk. So his head, he's got this big shave spot right down the middle of his head, and all this furry shit, and then he's shaved one half of his face, and the other half of his face he's got like a beard and stuff. And I just remember thinking, what the fuck? It's freaking 105 degrees in this place. Down in this basement, there's no air conditioner at all. The only windows they have are the ones that are at ground level, those little bitty windows, louver windows. And he's like, close those fucking windows, it's not hot enough in here. And I was like, God damn, I can't even breathe, man. And he shut those things. And they played, I don't really remember a lot of, what they, this music was like. It was the same thing. It was real fast and then real slow. And I ran into another guy that I knew from high school that I hadn't seen in a year since I graduated high school. And we were having fun. I was like, man, this is cool. I never went to a hardcore punk rock show. This is badass.
So kids showed up, and of course they did start drinking. The show was taking place. The cops showed up. And I remember I was speaking to the police right here, begging them not to shut the show down. They said as long as everybody stayed inside, we could do the show. So I managed to talk everybody to come back in. We had kids hanging from the cross up here, like where the cross used to be, acting like they were Jesus. And so anyway, I got everybody back inside. The show happened. It was a complete success. But after that, after we finished the show up, the people that ran the community church here told us we were never allowed to come back. And they weren't jerks about it. They were really cool guys, but they just said they couldn't have it. And I understand, now I understand why. Back then I was like, but why, but obviously, yeah. But on the way out, it got pretty crazy around here. So at that juncture, we had to look for a new venue. Thomas Manning, once again, found another place, and that was the Western Gateway Lions Club. We are standing at the corner of Palafox Street and Clarinda Lane. On this very site was the first place any punk or new wave bands ever played in the city of Pensacola, Florida. From the early 80s till about 1984, this place was known as McGuigan's Speakeasy. Now, a lot of bands came through and played. This is a little bit before my time, although I did attend McGuigan's Speakeasy once and saw the Congo Rebellion play with my sister and her boyfriend. In the late 1984s, this is the spot where all hardcore shows took place at in Pensacola primarily, with an exceptional few might be playing at the Handlebar. This place was bought out by the Pensacola Glass Company behind me in 1985, and it's still here. Where this ditch is pretty much where like the central part of the club would have been. The Mix was a really crappy little building, covered in spray paint. It was primarily a bottle club for African Americans in Pensacola at that time. A guy named James Brown, who was a nice black guy, ran the place, him and his wife, and I think his mom had a hand in it too, and they would also book punk shows here too. Now, Mike Graham, a.k.a. Vic Chaos from Maggot Sandwich, did all of the shows at that time. All of them were KML Productions, Chaos Music Limited. If you look back over here towards Palafox Street, about where that telephone pole is, maybe 4 feet to the right of that, and like maybe 3 or 4 feet into it is where the front entrance of the club used to be. I think probably right on the other side of this big sign is where the bands used to play. Now, a lot of really great bands played in this venue. We had Raw Power from Italy play here. We had the Micronauts from Kansas play here. We had a lot of the old Gulf Coast bands play from Mississippi, like No Rules, Reality on Trial from Louisiana, Legion of Decency from Mississippi played here. Marginal Man from Washington D.C. played, who were in the recent American Hardcore film. They played here on one of their last tours. But probably the watershed punk event of the entire Pensacola scene history was when Agnostic Front played here in 1985 during the Victim in Pain tour. It was unbelievable. I think there's probably 400 to 500 people here, and it was just a phenomenal show that really changed a lot of people's lives. This is the first place I ever felt like I belonged anywhere when I came to this place, and this is the first time I've stepped foot here since 1985 when it shut down. I met some of my best friends ever at this place, and I met people that changed my life, and it introduced me to a way of life that I still follow to this day, 24 years later. If you were like a punk, hardcore kid, people didn't like you, especially in the South and especially in Pensacola. It was a very conformist attitude, I think that's what everybody who was into the scene was trying to kind of get away from. So we had a lot of problems with jocks and rednecks. For a few times they came down here and tried to start fights. A lot of times we'd hang out back here. This was just a parking lot because this building wasn't here at that time. So kids would park their cars and we'd be drinking beer, listening to the music and stuff like that. And I remember one night we had some guys show up. I think they were from Washington High School, some baseball players. And they started a fight and they ended up getting a lot more than they bargained for. We ran them out. I remember we had one guy in his car. I think he was in a VW and we were rocking it back and forth and stuff like that. I think the biggest difference between now and then is it was something new back then. And the fact is that there was no internet, obviously. No mass media, and it wasn't accepted. It was a very unaccepted way of life, and that's what made it cool. Now you can have a freaking bone shoved through your nose and tattoos all over your throat, and you usually won't even get a second look. And back then, most people didn't even have tattoos. In any music scene, you have a group of people who somehow cosmically come together at the same time and meet each other and make things happen. And I tell you, it was a meteoric time. I mean, it happened and it burned out like that. We're talking like 84 to 87 in Pensacola. That's nothing. That's 3 years, And I was in the Marine Corps for 4, so, it's 1 year less than I was in the Marines. But during that 3-year period, it was phenomenal. People take shows for granted. They just expect them to happen. That's not how it was for us. Like, any show that came through town, even if I didn't have anything to do with it, I was promoting it. I was calling people. We were making flyers by ourselves and handing them out. So I think that's probably one of the big differences between now and then.